Hi, I'm Matthew. I just made my second CalArts film, When the Skies Are Blue, and now I'm going to talk about, how I made the film. Coming into the year, I knew I wanted to make a film that was different, at least different from my last year film. At CalArts, a big difference between your first and second year film, apart from being able to use color, dialogue, and also an extra minute of film, is that you had a film workshop. Film workshop is a class where every week we gather and just show our film stuff while also giving each other critique, and usually the teacher would give us some sort of advice on how to move forward with our film. We started with 1 week films just to get our creative filmmaking juices flowing. I hated every word of that. I made a film called The Life of the Party, which you can check out on this very channel. And I know I'm talking about my second year film, but I promised that this film was relevant for 2 reasons. For one, I used a technique that was like paper cutout animation in Adobe Animate because I was running out of time and this was just the most efficient way for me to animate. Basically what this meant was instead of making a new drawing every frame, I would just draw certain assets and move those assets around, and then whenever I needed to change the asset, I would just redraw that one asset instead of, you know, making a new drawing for every single new drawing I needed. And for another reason, this film got voted for most colorful in my film workshop, so I got to win myself a deck of index cards. So now on to the actual making of my actual film. Our first assignment was to come up with 5 film ideas. They didn't have to be good film ideas, they just had to be 5. I'm not going to share these ideas because I might still use some of them, but the one that stuck out to me the most and also had the biggest reaction in the class was the sitcom simulator. I got the index cards I won from 1 week ready to go, and I started boarding my film. The idea was this: a protagonist was living a normal, comfortable life when all of a sudden they walk into the wrong door and end up backstage where they see the behind the scenes of what's making their life possible. It's flimsy and unstable and messy, and it gives them this sort of sense of dread, but also a determination to do something about it. I was pretty happy with this idea, but the more I worked on it, the more problems I saw. The characters were just not interesting. They were just trying to move the story forward, and the story was kind of convoluted, and the world didn't really make sense, and overall it just kind of felt like a shallow metaphor. But it was okay. It was just October. I had plenty of time to scrap my idea and start over with a new one. So let's see, what were the other 5 ideas I came up with in film workshop? A boy whose emotions control the weather, but he's too embarrassed because he doesn't want all of this weather to affect the people around him, so he carries around a little umbrella to conceal all the rain to himself. But after having a really bad day, it sort of builds up and he loses his umbrella and it starts raining everywhere and he starts freaking out. But he soon notices that the rain is no big deal. It's okay to express your emotions even when other people are around. This was it. I thought I used the other half of my index cards. I got so excited I basically boarded the entire thing in like 2 days. I started doing visual development. I was like, what if the backgrounds were watercolor to represent like the rain? What if when the rain was trickling down, the watercolors would sort of like trickle down too, kind of like Gwen's world in Spider-Verse? What if the film had this like simple minimalistic palette of just yellow and blue? This film was going to be so boring to work on. I got so bored of working on this film so fast. There was no way I was going to work on it for an entire school year. It just wasn't weird enough for me. Like, it didn't feel like a film that I would make having full creative control over something. It felt like I was making it for someone else. It's November. I'm panicking. Last year I had all of my backgrounds already. What am I doing this year? I ran out of ideas. I ran out of index cards. Life sucks. I wanted to make something that actually said something about the world, but also felt personal. And both of these ideas were just on either side of that spectrum. I came up with other ideas, but none of them were hitting at all. And then election day hit. I don't think I have seen a day like this, where everyone was just unanimously in a bad mood. I found myself, like most people, just doom scrolling and trying to find something to make me feel better or feel anything. And what I realized was I was looking for art. I was looking for art that made me feel seen, art that gave me some sort of hope, art that wasn't disregarding what was going on in the world, art that helped me make sense of what was happening in the world. And it felt like for the first time in a long time, I was thinking about art not from the perspective of the creator, but the consumer. Why was art important, not just as a person who makes art, but as a person who just enjoys receiving art. This was an issue that was speaking to me, both on a personal level and just on a what's going on in the world around me level. What is the point of art? That's been a question that has been raised a lot recently, for some reason. So I went back to the 5 ideas that I wrote down, and one of them was just perfect. An artist trying to survive in the apocalypse. They've spent their whole life dedicated to a craft that has now been deemed useless. This felt important. This felt personal. This felt strange and unusual and weird. This was my second year film. I figured it out. Now I have to make it. Okay, so this film actually had a few versions. The first version was just an artist looking for like a community in the apocalypse, and they kept on getting rejected left and right because no one wanted an artist in these trying times. There was a very cynical version of this film where you actually see the artist dying, but then the art is found, and that was like sort of their legacy, but that was kind of straying away from the point that I was trying to make. I was gonna have some sort of monster or zombie for the apocalypse, but the more I was exploring that, the more it was just turning into Adventure Time. I think we were watching The Quiet Place in layout class, and I realized it's just so much scarier to have some threat that seems unavoidable, like the rain. Like rain from your previous film idea? That's right. I realized that changing my ideas wasn't a waste of time at all. I actually learned a lot from my past film ideas that I used in my current film. Growing off of the experience of my previous ideas, I knew I wanted to keep this one small. I needed to avoid the question, why does art matter? And instead answer, what's one reason why art matters? Besides, the film isn't the message. The film is the story and the characters. And hopefully the story that these characters tell can have some sort of takeaway to it. I believe it was someone in my film workshop that actually gave me the idea to pair the artist with a child. And so there's the heart of my film. Thank you, very smart and talented friends I have the pleasure of working with. When storyboarding, it became very clear that I had a lot that I needed to express with a very short amount of time. I only had 2.5 minutes to tell this story, so every shot and every line of dialogue really mattered. I had to convey that she was an artist, and originally, this film took place in a convenience store because apocalypse. But why not an art store, huh? That's much more specific, and you can get more like reactions out of her that would make it very clear that she is an artist. I wanted to establish the sort of backstory, like they aren't related, but they found each other through the apocalypse. Like how do I do that? Why not establish that the artist is looking for the child's parents? How do I convey that the art gives the child a hope for a better future? How about with a little jingle? You know, not everyone understands the value of art like artists, but that doesn't mean it's any less valuable. Almost like someone's favorite ice cream being pistachio. Little things like that came a long way in helping this short film not feel rushed, because that was something I was worried about the entire time making this film. But ultimately, these little details ended up just completely saving the pacing of this thing. Speaking of intentional details, visual development. I started exploring what a crystal rain apocalypse would even look like. Where would the crystals be growing if they were raining from the sky? What if there were different kinds of crystals? Different colors, different varieties? Wow, I really love the look of this one. Wait. Guy, the sky can't be blue. The whole point of the film is that the skies aren't blue. Yeah, so I had to change that detail. I settled for a purple instead to represent a sort of neutral ground between red being scary and blue being the hope for a normal world. Aw, look. It's an ending where they turned out okay. Something I wanted to keep consistent with my backgrounds was just the use of rough and more organic lines versus completely sharp and perfect lines. All of the crystals would be sharp and perfect, and everything else would be sort of organic, so that this thing looked like it was really just not belonging there and disrupting everything. Oh no, I killed the main character of my first film idea. Whoops. When designing the store, I thought it'd be really funny to imply that pretty much everything has been stolen from, except from the art supply store. If I could give one piece of advice for making backgrounds for this film, it's never set your film in a store. Like, just don't set your film in a store. There were so many details that I had to keep track of from various angles. Why was the main location of my film in a store? When it came to the destruction scenes, I actually thought it would be interesting to make it look almost bloody, like a massacre of art supplies. Almost like art itself had died. I made sure to include specific details that would really piss artists off, like crinkling the pages in a sketchbook, or just spilling paint all over everything, having markers dried up and exposed on the floor. But enough about backgrounds, let's talk about animation! I had considered a number of ideas for animation. Maybe I could use Blender. Maybe I could learn Toon Boom Harmony. But after staring at that application for half an hour, I settled on my comfort software, Adobe Animate. Due to feeling crunched on time, I ended up using the same technique that I had used for my 1-week film. Told you that would come in handy. The paper cutout style was simple, but sophisticated looking enough that I felt like I could get away with it. The most important thing was it allowed me to tinker with like little subtle details that would have just taken me forever if I had to do it frame by frame. Had I gone for another style in animating, I don't think that I would finish my film. The compositing actually did a lot of the heavy lifting. Not only did I use it to create the lighting and atmosphere, but I also used it to create this virtual camera sort of thing. I thought it'd be cool to add a shaky camera effect to when things start going bad, just to add a little tension and separate those two parts of the film. And with that, my film was done, except not really, because it needed sound and stuff. I teamed up with my friend Etia to actually go to one of the recording studios in our school to record every single sound in my film, except for ambiances and glass shattering sounds, because we weren't allowed to do that.
Yeah.
Damn it! For music, I really let Etia take the lead. I sort of just gave him the soundtrack to Infinity Train and told him to run with it. And after 8 months of work, it was finally finished. As I sat in the open show, I awaited people's reactions. And when my film played, I heard absolutely nothing. That was when I realized when you make a comedic film, you can hear people laughing. When you make a more somber film, you can't hear the audience's reaction. I was so nervous that my film just wasn't working emotionally. It wasn't until afterward when people told me they actually liked my film and that some people even cried at my film that I felt so relieved. Film success! And now some final thoughts, because I think that it's easy to get caught up in constantly working without doing a little bit of reflection. But I actually want to take a moment to think about what I did and see what I can learn from it, because I didn't spend 8 months just to make a 2.5-minute film and move on with my life. For one, I feel like I put a little too much pressure on this film. This film should be important and something that I care about and feels like represents me, but at the same time, I don't want to be pressured to the point of being paralyzed from not making anything at all. I want to make more films. I want to tell more stories. So it's okay if one of them isn't the best thing I've ever made in my entire life. If I were to do it again, I would just say not to rush myself. I felt like I was so worried that production was going to take so long that I rushed through pre-production, but pre-production's the part that actually makes the film what it is. So next time I want to allow myself to actually settle into a story that I feel is strong enough and that I'm proud enough to work on for months. Thank you for watching this process video. I know it was really long, but hopefully you learned something from seeing my process, or at the very least just enjoyed watching how I made this film. If you want to see this progress happen live while I'm making this progress, consider joining the Cool Kids table. That's what I call my Patreon. For just $3 a month, you can see work in progress videos. I stream every week, and it's just a good old time to hang out. But yeah, anyways, if you hadn't watched my film before this for some reason, go check that out. Otherwise, yeah, that's it.